In Chapter 5, we're going to cover traditional management, scientific management, and management by objectives. So let's start off as the book does, and we're on page 54. We're going to start off talking about traditional management. Traditional management is an outgrowth of the Industrial Revolution. We had a major change in how goods were produced during the Industrial Revolution. Before, we had goods produced by highly trained people in very small quantities. But the Industrial Revolution gave us access to factories and production lines that could produce a mass quantity of goods, and that was no longer important to have a skilled craftsman working on each individual item. Instead, we could divide the item into parts and have each employee work on a small portion. So it became that each worker there became just knowledgeable in specific tasks that worker was producing. Now, these management concepts are traced back to the late 1600s. Adam Smith is given credit for defining principles and practices of traditional management, although he did not invent the strategy. Traditional management also creates distinct divisions between the roles and responsibilities of labor and management. The key principle of traditional management is working through others. So management is the brains of the operation, and employees are the extension of the manager. Some problems arise with the traditional management method. So let's look at those. In traditional management, well, one of the problems perceived by employees, and one of the problems with it, is that ideas and suggestions are just not wanted by employees. The manager thinks, well, I'm the one hired to make the decisions. I'll do that. I don't need the input from employees. Why? Well, we think employees are incapable of making sound decisions. But we think that they can be very productive and very efficient under the guidance of the skillful manager, the brains behind the operation. You're probably already seeing a lot of problems with this. This doesn't sound like a management system in which I would want to work. I don't know about you. In an assembly line, each employee has to do its own specific task. And if we don't listen to the input of employees, as we don't with traditional management, we don't find out about the things on the line that may can be improved. In fact, a good example of an assembly line work is we toured the Ford assembly plant in Norfolk, Virginia, and I met one worker there that was 70-some years old, and he was the exception to the rule. He had worked at Ford for over 36 years. His sole job was putting right side door panels on Ford F-150s. So that's what he did on the assembly line. Now you can imagine, well, the guy that his job probably wasn't, he didn't say this, but it probably wasn't very satisfying, probably wasn't very fulfilling. But it wasn't difficult, and he was paid pretty well. So each employee, just like him, is performing a small, unskilled task out of the thousands required to produce a car. So, and this leads to another problem with traditional management, and that is the employees can't see the whole of their work. It's not that they can't see that the truck was created there, but you kind of can lose sight of that real quick if all you're doing is putting on door panel after door panel after door panel. Eventually you become to take that job, I guess, for granted, or you become to get bored in that particular job. And employees tend to lose pride in their work, just because, well, we don't see where what I'm doing really contributes that much. So these are some of the issues with traditional management. So let's look at some of the fears of the traditional manager and some things that work to and some things they do to even complicate the situation even further. These are your three basic fears of traditional managers. Okay, A traditional manager thinks, well, I'm the brains, so I'm responsible for everything that goes on here. Okay, so he feels like, well, if I delegate my responsibility, well, I'm no longer the brains. I have to do everything. I'm given credit when things go right, and I'm blamed when things go wrong. And most of the time that traditional manager will feel like, well, I gave my employees perfect instructions. They didn't follow through. Therefore, they just don't have it. They just are probably not good employees. Well, there may be some other problems going on, and that doesn't exactly seem fair. How about decision making? Okay, if you look at the traditional manager, they made me the manager because I'm so good at decision making. Okay, if I give up that role, or if I share those decision makers with other people, doesn't that take away from my position? Okay, I don't need input. I don't need suggestions from my employees because I'm the decision maker. Seeing some problems with this? I thought so. Now, controlling. Okay. Now, another problem with managers, another fear is in traditional management is controlling the employees. We want our employees to perform good, but a fear of a traditional manager is if they perform too good, okay, they may rise up and take my job. So I want to let them perform good enough to make me look good, but not good enough where they'll take my job. So we can kind of look at these three things and realize that there's some trade-offs to all of this, and what we perceive as bad as a fear might actually be good. For example, delegating. Okay, yes, you'll give up some of your responsibility, you'll give up some of your power, but if we don't, the employees won't have any buy-in, and as a result, as a manager, I'll spend all my time watching and making sure the employees are doing their job, and that's hardly productive for the manager. Now, next, by decision making, okay, if you don't ask for employee input into decision making, you're really going to lower the morale of those employees. Okay, if I ask for input, the employees feel more appreciated and more likely to feel involved and motivated. And how about the controlling thing? Well, if I am worried that my top performing employee might take my job, that's really backwards thinking, because I should be, as a manager, I should be looking out for that person that shows the responsibility and the drive to one day become management. And I should be working with them to train that person. Okay, if I can train that person and I work with that person, I make sure he's good, more than likely he's going to end up doing an outstanding job. As a result, as his manager, it's going to make me look good. When it becomes time for promotion, I'm going to get promoted because I did such a good job. He's going to fill that position because he did such a good job under me, and it's a win-win for everybody. So that's the basics behind traditional management, and we see that as some of these problems with inefficiencies and employee morale, Frederick Taylor tried to improve on with scientific management. Now, scientific management is a more scientific and systematic approach to breaking down the work process. Okay, we're going to make sure that every employee knows their small part in it, okay, thus improving on traditional management, and then managing to ensure that work is consistently performed. So that's the whole basis, is consistency. Now, Frederick Taylor is the father of this scientific management, and his objective was to increase efficiency and create a new environment that would bring prosperity to all. Okay. He saw several key problems with traditional work and argued that more scientific and systematic management could overcome them. Okay. He summarized the commonplace concerns as the root of inefficiency. Okay, so these were the inefficiencies that he was trying to deal with. Okay, Taylor cited these concerns as the root of inefficiencies. First off, labor concerned that they work too hard and working themselves out of a job. So in other words, as if we work harder, we're going to become more efficient, we're going to get more done, and management's going to realize they don't need us. So maybe we need to slow down and not work quite as hard. Okay. How about defective management systems causing employees to work slower? Okay, they talk about a process known as soldiering. Okay, let's write that in here. Well, if I manage and pretty much everyone gets the same pay regardless of what they're doing, what ends up happening is the people that are working real hard realize the people that aren't working are getting paid just as much as they are, and they lose that motivation to work harder. They're like, what's the point? I'm going to back off too. He's getting paid the same thing I am. Okay, so that's something that has to be overcome. And then the rule of thumb method, okay, he's basically saying that the workers did not have the knowledge or skills to do their jobs completely or consistency. So the workers needed management because the workers that were performing the work were not smart enough to realize the production gains that could be gained by just minimizing the motions and substituting fast motions and efficient motions for slow and inefficient. Okay, so the men that he was supervising were assumed to be too dumb to understand how best to work, so they had to rely on the manager to inform them of how the work should be done. So again, you're starting to see some problems with scientific management. He also thought that management asked employees to do too much. Okay, he thought that we should limit the amount of work that each employee should do and assign only the tasks that fell into their limited capacity. Okay, so to fully explain Taylor's theory, to fully explain it, an orchestra. Okay, the workers are all just musicians, and the conductor is the manager. Conductor knows when to start and stop each instrument, knows which instrument should play and when and how, and the musicians just have to accept the conductor and follow everything that he says. Okay, and since the musicians don't have to make decisions, they can focus on what they do best and what they know, and that is playing their instrument. Okay, so Taylor sought to create a harmonious work environment, but by breaking down each employee's role into a small, simple, and finite part of the whole process, employee morale was severely compromised. Okay, if you treat, or if I treat an employee as if he's too stupid to make decisions for himself, chances are that's going to really drive down that employee's morale, and as a result, it's going to drive down efficiency. However, Taylor's theory did improve efficiency, but it failed to improve on the low morale that was a carryover from traditional management. So we increased the problem of low morale. So the people that didn't like traditional management and they had low morale in traditional management, well, scientific management just came out with more regulations and even less brain power on the part of the employees, and really drove down employee morale. And that's also a bad situation. Whenever you don't feel good about what you're doing or see yourself as valued by your organization, you start having negative feelings toward the organization. That can lead to all sorts of things, like just poor workmanship, poor attendance. You can also, in some certain situations, sabotage. So now we've kind of abandoned both the scientific and traditional management styles, although you may still see them in some businesses, but probably not a business in which any of you want to work. I feel safe in saying. So let's look at George Odiorn, who is a strong proponent of management by objective. What is management by objective then? So management by objective is a system based primarily on outputs that blends individual plans and needs of managers toward a large-scale accomplishment within a specific period of time. So what's that mean? Basically, we're looking at objectives, setting up deadlines, getting everybody involved in the input process, focusing on the objectives. What do we want to happen, and making sure this happens. Now we're getting the buy-in, and we're getting the commitment of everybody that works at the organization, because they have some say and some voice in the direction of the organization. So you can see how that would tend to improve morale. Okay, so according to the theory, everyone within the organization has to commit to focus on objectives, time strategy, total management, and individual motivation. So as we said, with objectives, we clearly focus on the outputs, the objectives, and we have a universal commitment by all employees to achieve those objectives. In time strategy, we set deadlines. We say we have to meet it by a certain amount of time. And with total management, okay, we must coordinate. Managers have to coordinate the efforts of individuals, but success depends upon clearly communicating goals and objectives and obtaining employee commitment to supporting them. So if we have employees that share the knowledge and share the understanding, okay, it reduces the frustration and minimizes lost effort. Everybody's striving for the same goal, and everybody knows the goals. And with motivation, okay, the whole MBO design actually focuses on the needs and desires of an organization. But since I'm considering the employee's needs and considering the employee's goals, the employee's individual motivation improves as well. So if we compare scientific with management by objective, okay, we realize that they share many common traits. But management by objectives deals with one of the biggest drawbacks of scientific management, and that is the lowered employee morale. And they also differ dramatically in their approach toward employee involvement in the planning and execution of management plan. Employee involvement in the scientific theory, we don't have any. In management by objective, we encourage it. Okay, we get our employees involved in developing objectives and timeline. We get a higher level of commitment to these goals. Okay, management by objectives solicits input from employees that ensure their needs are met. So in an MBO system, we end up expecting the following. We expect that employees are more motivated because they have participated in planning and carrying out the plan. We get fixed timelines that will increase the likelihood of completing projects by their deadlines. We get employees that clearly understand the goals and objectives of the company, and morale is higher throughout the organization. But the traditional manager, and we're on page 60, okay, expects the following. Now here's what the traditional manager expects. The manager will clearly and very specifically define the individual task employees will perform. All employees will carry out these tasks in exactly the same manner. Employees will not deviate in any way from specific directions they receive. Employees will not question or try to improvise upon the assigned directions. All employees will work as interchangeable parts in a complex system. So you can see how traditional management, scientific management, and management by objective all differ. That's pretty much the extent of chapter 5. Read through it. It's a very short chapter, but a wealth of information. You can do some internet searches as well if you're more interested in this, on Frederick Taylor and Adam Smith, and on management styles, and you'll find some very interesting readings on this stuff. And a lot that relates to the car industry, because this is one of the industries that was most affected by scientific management, as you could expect on an assembly line. So that'll do it for 5.